Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, so the topic today is parenting, cheating, and child attributes. Okay, I think another person is joining, so we'll give it just 1 second. Okay. So, Bismillah. So I think a message went out and it said parenting, cheating, and child abuse. I think that's just a typo. It's the topic is parenting, cheating, and child attributes. I guess we can talk a little bit about abuse, but so for those who have attended sessions that I've done on this platform, this is meant to be extremely interactive. So I'd like everybody to try to chime in to maximize benefit. And so first question, I have put up a couple of pictures of refugee camps, Afghan refugee camps. What do you notice? And you can take yourself off mute and please just shout out, what do you notice?
Kids having fun.
Kids having fun, very good. What else? So, you know, I use structured inquiry when I do these forums, right? So just any refugee camp, tell me what you notice. In this case, I'm specifically referring to Afghanistan. And it doesn't have to be these specific pictures, but what are some of the things that ideas or things that you notice when you look at a refugee camp's pictures? What do you see?
Poverty looks like.
Very good, poverty, what else?
Broken down housing, no dirt road. I mean, it's like dusty and unhealthy.
Yeah.
Looks like
dusty, unhealthy. Okay. What else?
A lot of children.
Huh?
A lot of children.
Very good. A lot of children. A lot of children.
Are those parents on the first picture on top? Are those parents or teenagers? I'm not able to tell. I was going to say the second picture looks like we're missing parents. There are only kids playing around. I don't see any parents.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you see a lot of children. So what else do you notice? Because I'm building an entire argument around this imagery, okay? So if my argument, if my argument is to be valid or understood, right? We have to have some type of understanding about this. So, and the reason I bring this case up is I was 9 when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, right? And so the imagery was extremely powerful to me whenever I saw imagery of refugee camps, especially being of Pakistani origin, right? So the next to last slide, we go back to this question, that when you see the refugee camps, what do you see? So far, the audience, the participants have said, we see poverty, we see kids having fun, we see a lot of children, etc. Okay, now let's go on next question. What is cheating? What is cheating? Seems totally unrelated, but those who've attended have some idea. So what is cheating? And again, just shout out for those who are not regular attendees. Just when I say shout, when I ask a question like this, just shout out whatever comes to your mind. You're not supposed to get it right. We just teach each other through this forum. So what is cheating?
Avoiding the truth.
Truth?
Avoiding, yeah.
Avoiding truth. Okay. Yeah. What else?
Taking shortcuts.
Very good. Taking shortcuts. Okay, I think that was Sister Maliha. Very good. Taking shortcuts is excellent. Very good. What else?
Covering one's guilt. Trying to...
Okay, that's also good. Covering one's guilt. Okay, very good. What else?
We'll go falsifying information.
False information. Very good. Excellent. Okay, very good. So cheating is defined as a verb. It's usually practicing fraud and deceit, violating rules or regulations. So everything here is saying the same thing as the dictionary definition of cheating. Okay, very good. Now, what I'm arguing here is this. Whatever you do mediocre, expect it to directly impact your kids negatively. Okay? That's the argument I'm making. And I'll tie this into because as believers, right, we don't see things in isolation. We try to always see the forest through the trees. We see ourselves as part of a whole, okay? Like I myself, there are studies to prove this. If you ask, say, a Westerner, who are you, right? They usually will identify with their degree, their profession, et cetera, right? You ask, say, a non-Westerner, they'll say, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a Muslim, right? And there's a lot of studies to prove this. And that just doesn't mean Muslim. Like if you ask a question, say if I were to ask this to the kid's mom, she's gonna say, I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a daughter. People from non-Western cultures, when they asked who they are, they express themselves in terms of relationships. People from Western culture, when they asked who they are, they express themselves in terms of a spec sheet and accomplishments. And this goes back to fundamentally the premise of Western civilization, which is individual sovereignty. Whereas we believe in the sovereignty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we believe and we see ourselves as part of a greater whole. So that's a very important idea to understand. Now, the values of Western civilization are very noble ones. The rights of the individual, the rule of law, equality of humanity. And we have to be careful here. It's not that Western civilization is only the only civilization in history that's had those values. So what I'm mentioning here is to try to give an overview. So what I'm arguing here is, when I say parenting and cheating, as a parent, I need to understand a basic truth. That if I do something mediocre, I should expect it to directly impact my kids negatively. And to expect otherwise is at best really ignorant or outright deception, because then you're cheating yourself. So what I'm arguing here is, can there be a bigger fool than someone who cheats their own children? And on this, we're going to reach intellectual consensus. Everyone is going to say, no, it's not possible for you to be a bigger fool than someone who cheats their own children. Now, let's look at our behaviors and our actions. Alhamdulillah, there's no one on this call that is looking to rob a bank. There's no one here that is, inshallah, looking to do insider trading. Inshallah, there's no one here trying to commit fraud in financial transactions. And those are good things. And we can generally, most people who are a little practicing will avoid those type of things. But I want everyone to think about this in a little different context. Say, what are my behaviors as a parent? And if I expect my good behaviors to impact my children positively, then I should, by logical extension, expect my bad behaviors to affect my children negatively. I don't think anyone would dispute that. So what I'm asking is, let's just take one simple thing. If you're late, you're cheating your kids. Because you're telling your child time management is not important. What is our most precious commodity? It's not really our money. It's our time. It's a Saturday morning. The weather is great. You could be in a lot of other places than today, than hearing this presentation. You made the effort to be here on a Saturday morning to hear this presentation. And there's a lot of things you could be doing. So I would be thieving your time because you've extended me the courtesy to attend. I would be thieving your time if I was unprepared to give this presentation. If I hadn't thought about my talking points and I was just going to wing it, it would be disrespectful to the audience. And in proper gentleman's English, that's what they used to call it. thieving someone's time, thieving. They wouldn't say waste, they would say you are thieving my time. So when we see that there's such utter confusion over the last 2 decades, definitely, I don't think there's anyone in the space of activism in the Muslim community who will not agree that Islamic literacy has actually gone backwards. Whereas it should have increased with all the tools and the video streaming. And I remember working on a project in 2007 and 8. It was just too costly to stream videos live. Islamic institution couldn't afford it. It was 2007 or 8. It was just too expensive. Now with all of the platforms and being able to stream live, you would think Islamic literacy would have increased, but it hasn't. If you're being intellectually honest and you really have done enough research. So what I'm arguing here is if you're late, you're cheating your kids. Because you are teaching them behaviors that they're going to keep for the rest of their life. And anybody will say, being on time is a sign of productivity, is a sign of success, is a sign of a serious person. Nobody will dispute that. But ask ourselves how often it's important for us to be on time. And what I've noticed is, alhamdulillah, Allah's blessed me with 4 children. When your child really understands the gulf between our espoused theories of what we say we stand for and what we actually do in our life, it really becomes apparent when the child enters 6th grade. At least in the environment that we're living, when you're living in zip code 60187 in these zip codes. Because it's at that age that the child gets into middle school, and then they realize they have 3 minutes to come class to class. And if they walk in late to class, they end up being sent to detention or have to do extra school work or whatever it is at school. And they realize that is how the world operates. When they enter 6th grade, I can't just show up late to a class and think that there are no consequences. There are consequences. But when they walk inside Muslim institutions, when they walk inside, that they see managing time is not important. The speaker walks in half an hour late, and then he says, I haven't made salah yet. And he makes the whole audience wait while he's making salah. And then we want to joke this thing away. Like I was in Pakistan one time with a very high-powered IT executive. We're talking about someone who had actually taken a company public. So this is not some project manager. And he asked me a very profound question. He said, you are a professional development person. I have a question here. He said, he said, I'm completely baffled. And again, this is a guy who had taken a company public. So he really had very astute business acumen and observation power. He said, it's weird here. He said, when it comes time for prayer, it's done on time. There are people that the ones who pray, I could be mid-sentence and they'll get up and say, I gotta go pray. So in this country, here in Karachi at least, prayer is done on time. He said, why can this not be extended to business meetings and everything else? He said, it's not that you don't have the capacity. He said, if prayer is done on time, why can't this be extended to other behaviors? So what I'm arguing here is, let's go back to this refugee camp. When I look at this refugee camp, one of the things that you notice here is there are very few men. And being like an 11, 12-year-old, I remember I was extremely perturbed. I used to say, where are all the men? Where are all the men? Where are all the men? Let's open up the floor again. Where are all the men?
Must have died in wars and displaced.
Very good. The men had either been killed because of the war, or they have sent their the women and children to the refugee camps of Pakistan, and they've stayed back to fight. My original reaction being an 11, 12-year-old is, wait, why are all these kids there without their dads? Because that was my worldview. That was the question an 11 or 12-year-old is going to ask, that if the children are in a vulnerable state, why is their father not there to help them? Right? But then I remember the documentarian explicitly saying, the reason there are no men is because they have either been killed as a result of the war, or they have made a decision to stay back and fight. So the question as a parent is, what sacrifices am I, specifically a father, willing to make for my wife and children? What am I willing to do? What does it take? Because parenting now is more complicated than at any time in history. And we've done some research on this. Look, parenting, the diet is against you. The processed foods, right? The social structure tells you when you're 15, 16 to assert your independence. The basic things of society had a certain framework. Like what used to happen, say, even 50, 60 years ago, if say a son had a little bit of a tiff with his father, right? What would usually happen? He would leave and go to an uncle's house. And the uncle would call the father and say, listen, your son is here, don't worry about it. Now, your 18-year-old has a tiff with the father. He on a cell phone, he texts a knucklehead who's also and says, hey, look, I had a tiff with my father, and the knucklehead doesn't say, listen to your parents or this or that. He says, listen, I'm having difficulty paying rent anyway, come be my roommate. The processed food is against you. The individual sovereignty is against you. The entertainment sector is against you. And I'm going to say this in a very provocative way, because I know there's sisters on the audience, but this way you will never forget the lesson. Why has becoming a pole dancer become so mainstream and accepted in the last two and a half decades? Why?
Most of the movies showed that.
The movies, but more than that.
Songs glorifying.
Very good, the songs, the rappers. The rapper singing, I want to date a stripper. So if you look back, just do the research 30 years ago, the people in that field would keep that profession private. They would tell their families, I'm a waiter. This became totally mainstream, not only because of the movies, but more so because of the rap material. And there are studies to prove that. So what I'm asserting is the entertainment sector is against you. The diet and the processed food is against you. There are at least 23 million children that live in single-family homes. It's actually cool to tell your 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old friends to say that you kind of like deceived your parents. So it is extremely hard to raise your children in today's environment. And anyone who argues otherwise is just not being honest. As a parent, you have been dealt a very difficult hand. So let's just say even bullying. Bullying didn't start with the smartphone, but children who were bullied before, they were bullied only on school time or on school grounds. Now, if you're a child, you could be bullied 24/7. So I don't want to sit and argue that parenting is easy. Parenting is extremely complicated and extremely difficult. But Allah does not put us in a situation that we are not capable of carrying the weight. That is his promise to us. So let's look at this idea. So what I'm arguing here is this. Let's say if you smoke. Now, I'm going to try to tell you what I think you need here. If you as a parent smoke, as a man smoke, you can't tell your child not to smoke weed. It's very simple. Weed is not legal. And if you tell your child don't to smoke, you know what he's going to say? He's going to say, well, smoking causes lung cancer, weed does not. And here's the data. And he's going to Google it, and you're going to lose the argument. So if you smoke, this is no longer a personal choice. Understand? You need to make dua every day your child doesn't smoke weed. And we're not even talking about the hookah lounges, which is a whole other thing. Let's say interacting with extended family. As soon as dad walks out of the house, mom starts calling and talks about how bad her in-laws are. Do you really think your 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old child doesn't notice this? Your child notices. Because I've had these situations. And then later on, when the child gets 22, then the parents say, we found someone suitable for you on dad's side of the family. The child says, hell no. I haven't seen you say anything positive about dad's family in 2 decades. So you should not do this, not only because it's backbiting. You should not do this because it undermines the integrity of the family unit. You should not do this because your child is watching. And this is going to come back to haunt you. Because generally people are living in nuclear families, but not everybody has WhatsApp. Over the smallest things, we can show our anger and our rage. And we do it in front of the children. I'm saying as a community. I'm not pointing them as a, and does the mother really think that the 6-year-old does not know? The child knows. The child knows. Let's take this. This is actually a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. Do you really think your 6-year-old doesn't know whenever there's free food, mom and dad are at the masjid, as soon as the speaker starts talking, they leave. And they see this regularly. Do you really think your child does not put 2 and 2 together? Your child knows this is a clown show. And mom and dad show up at the masjid for free food. Your child knows, buddy. Your child knows. And by you trying to spin it, no, maybe they'll hear something. No, your child knows that as soon as the speaker starts speaking, mom and dad leave. And usually when mom gets home, she opens up her pocketbook and she's got she's got plates of food. Your 6-year-old knows, buddy, what is happening. And they know what the masjid is for. It is not to remember Allah. It is not for those things. It's a place that you go to socialize. So when the kid is 16 and he's trying to figure out why mom and dad are not telling him the date, and you try to play the Islamic card, no, they've seen this Islamic card for 10 years, 12 years. They've seen the card. And they know how important it is. They know how important it is. Improper parking. The child knows. The child knows. So what I'm saying is the way that we behave, we should expect our children to behave that way on steroids, in a negative way. On a positive way, if I only make 2 salah a day, at best I should have an expectation my child may make 1. Because you live in a time in which there is nothing that is sacred. It is just not that attendance is dropping for Christians. Every religious denomination Like I've talked to people who are accountants and CPAs who do bookkeeping for non-Muslim financial churches and institutions. And almost without exception, everyone comes back and say the only thing keeping us afloat is that there are people who have passed away and they have bequeathed some assets to us in their will. We have to be hyper vigilant on what we say and do in front of our own children, not in front of the other musallis at the masjid. Because again, our public persona is, of course, what we guard, and we guard it very closely. But the thing that really matters is how we behave in front of our children. They are the ones carrying our DNA. They are the ones that are going to ask for forgiveness when we pass away. They are the ones that are going to do these things. And when we have shown them mediocrity as individuals and as institutions, do not think that the child is not putting 2 and 2 together. The child is putting 2 and 2 together. And Dr. Ali Shariati, he said there are 5 things that comprise a person. That a person's personality is comprised of 5 things. Number 1, the biggest influence on a child is the mom. Number 2, the second biggest thing that comprises a child's personality is the dad. And number 3, it's their education. Number 4, it's the environment or civilization that they live in. And number 5, it is the time or the era. Those are the 5 things that are inputs into us as individuals that make us who we are. Again, number 1, mom. Number 2, dad. Number 3, our educational background. Number 4, the civilization that we are in. And number 5, the era, the time period. So the first 3 are very self-explanatory. The number 4 and 5 is like, are you in a Bedouin society? Are you in an agrarian society? Are you in Rome at a certain time? Or are you in a village? And the era and time period. When we are hyper-connected, we have to look at this. So our behavior is magnified. Our behavior is magnified. So what I'm arguing here is when you look at this, you see men make the sacrifices for their wife and children. Men are supposed to go the extra mile. And it's as if mediocrity is something funny and amusing in our community. So I really see this, right, as people being very unjust to their children. Your child is enrolled in the local karate class. The instructor is qualified. Class starts at 4 o'clock. You drop them off at 4:10. This matters. Because if the child does the same thing in middle school, the child has to go to after-school detention. And so the child sees 2 worldviews. He sees that when I'm at school, the world is round. When I'm at home or with Muslims, the world is flat. And then as the child gets older, the child begins to see more and more the inconsistencies between the values that we say we espouse and how we act. And then we ask why 1/3 of the people are marrying outside the faith. And that's a whole nother discussion, because unfortunately, that is going to really accelerate over the next 5 to 10 years. So I've said a lot here. I said, look, when you are mediocre, when you don't do things well. Now, all of us can't be brain surgeons. All of us can't be world-class athletes. That's not what we're arguing here. All of us are not going to make it to the NBA or the national team of the World Cup. What we can do is whatever cards we have, we can try to pursue excellence. We can say, okay, when I do this, this is how this is going to. So if I smoke, now that weed is completely legal in America, remember when I think it was 2-3 years ago when weed was legalized in Colorado, a whole bunch of people went to Colorado for vacation. And now this is becoming completely mainstream. I remember being in business meetings and they would say like, okay, we know you don't drink, so how about you just meet us at the hookah lounge? I was like, come on, okay, you know, can't we just have a meeting and not have and now it's like, you know, thank goodness, you know, but I know now the question. We just, it's completely normalized. It's completely normalized. There's no stigma attached to it. So mediocrity is not an option for a Muslim parent. And your biggest responsibility is to your children. Your biggest responsibility is to your children. And the little things is what the child picks on up at the age of 6, 7, and 8. And keep in mind, they carry these habits throughout their life. I'm completely baffled when a parent speaks to me and says, why is it my child was working at the grocery store for about 10 weeks and then got fired? And then they went over to the Walmart and they were there for about 7 weeks and then they got fired. And then they went over to the Target and they were there about 12 weeks and then they quit. It's completely baffling how you could be 16 years old and by the time you graduate high school, you've had 4 or 5 different jobs. At least in the zip code we live, every single place has help wanted signs. Just ask yourself that question of the people that you're with, that you're age, that you know who are 16, 17, 18 in this age group, right? Just ask yourself, how many jobs have you held? I mean, how difficult is it to be a cashier? How difficult is it to do these things? How difficult is it to maintain these odd jobs? This is not a sweatshop. So any questions on this? I'd like to open the floor now. The reason I'm saying this is because then if your child at the age of 17, 18, 19 can't hold down an odd job, this is the parents' responsibility that they have not shown responsibility, right?
So, Jazakallah khair, Brother Asad. Yeah, if anyone has any questions for Brother Asad, feel free to either, you guys can use the chat feature or you can just ask him.
Yeah. So we have to be hyper vigilant on how we behave in front of our kids. That is my key point today. Hyper vigilance. In front of Allah, of course, but in front of the children. They are watching everything. They know, your children know that when you talk to your mom, your tone is such and such, and when you talk to your mother-in-law, your tone is such and such. Your children are not stupid. Your children are not stupid. They observe even tone. So, any questions, inshallah? Any comments?
I didn't have a question, but I had a comment.
Sure.
Especially about the practice of children being tardy, especially to school. You know, just being in the field myself, I've noticed that more often than not, that children are tardy, not because them not being on time, but because the parent is at fault. And they do not understand that starting off the day on a positive note really impacts the child's entire day. When you start off negatively, usually that's the way the course runs throughout the day. So, you know, a child being, having to go to detention or being punished because a parent is at fault, really does impact the child mentally and does impact their day for their school day. And it is very important, especially, in school, that you start off your day, on a positive note.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that comment, Sister Malia. And that's exactly where we're driving. You have no right to put your child in a situation that their day starts off crummy, that they're embarrassed in front of their classmates and their teacher. And it's not the child's ineptitude, it's yours. You have cheated, you have mistreated your child. I'm not going to say it's unfair to the child. No, you have mistreated your child by getting your child late to school. So any other comments? Because this is important. Again, for those who attend, I will try to, two things we try to do. One is force you to look at issues or topics from different perspectives. You don't have to agree, but at least you are looking at the material or content from a different perspective to spur your thing. And two, we do try to ask probing questions because it's the only way we're going to improve as a community. So any other ideas or comments?
I have a comment. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the part about, a child holding down a job or moving on, I mean, I kind of disagree in a little way. If you get fired, it's a different thing. But if you're switching like 6, 7, 8 jobs by the time you're out of high school or college, but if you're doing it for pay or your self-worth, I think that's okay. I mean, I personally know people who have, had multiple jobs by the time, like again, 6, 7, 8 jobs by the time they're done with college. And it was all not just because, oh, I can't hold down that job, but it was because they know their self-worth. They're not going to stick around to a position where, they feel like they're not getting paid enough. It's okay to move on and getting paid better or more for, a position. And to like, look at different fields, whatever you feel like, this will be good for you or not. So, and those people are now like, adults and they're pretty successful, alhamdulillah. So, I know in this day and age might be a little bit different, but it shouldn't discourage, you should always tell your child that, yeah, you do this job, but if you think it's not for you, find another job and move on. Get better pay, get better skills. Even if it's not, the pay is not better, get better skills.
No, that's very good. No, Talha, that's a very good clarification. So it's good that you clarified that because I didn't mean it in that context, but I think it's good you clarified that. I generally say, even to professionals, forget about young, that you should leave a job when you're not learning anything anymore. Your career trajectory, you don't leave a job for salary, you leave a job when you feel I've learned all I can at this specific place. So, but thank you for that clarification and I agree, okay? Okay. So what other, please chime in because sometimes, this is not, these sessions, they're not meant to be monologues or lectures because we should really reflect. We have to reflect, we have to inquire because we have to improve. Ultimately, our biggest contribution is, for most of us, is going to be how well our children practice a religion when they have a certain amount of independence. At the age of 6 or 7, you can force your kid to the masjid. The question is your child 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 22, are they still coming to the masjid? Is the religion a part of their life? And that is where you begin to say that if you did what you should have when the child was 6, 7, 8, and 9, at the age of 22, 23, 24, you begin to see the fruits of it. The time to worry about it is not when they're in college.
Yeah, actually, Brother Asad, wonderful topic. I mean, most of us probably have faced this, in any masjid, any neighborhood, we go to, we always see, our children, when they're younger, following the rules and going to the masjid often. But over time, I mean, pretty much every community is facing the same issue. once they hit, the late teens, 20s, they are not attached to the masjid, as much, even though the parents have tried to do their best, and inculcated, the values and, the love for the masjid and, the community. But over time, somehow it breaks down. It's, I don't know if there's any particular, environmental issue or circumstance. You did cover quite a bit, mashallah. But I mean, it's a trend. I mean, everywhere that we go to, that we face this issue.
Yeah, and 2 points. So for example, I was talking to someone very high up in the Presbyterian churches of the United States. And he said, listen, officially, our congregation is officially dropping 100,000 congregants a year throughout the country. And he said, that's official. People contact us, correspond with us, and tell us we are no longer Presbyterian, and specifically tell us. Those are just not the people who decide they're not Presbyterian, that decide not to inform us. And, I've had some interaction with some of the groups who come to ICW as part of outreach. And a couple of the pastors have told me, like when they've been here, say on Friday, they've said, look, you have more people here on a regular Friday, young people, than we have, say, in our congregation on Easter Sunday. So the point I'm saying to you is, one, we should not be so negative. But the other point, this is a whole other topic, the role of religion in secular society. It is not cool to be religious. It is not cool to believe in something you cannot prove, which is, again, a very, very it's a conference. It's not a 30-minute thing. So we have to keep this in mind. So we should also be balanced. But when I say we have to be hyper vigilant, I know the kids watch everything I do. I think Umar radiallahu anhu, when he became Khalifa, he sat his boys down and said, listen, now that I'm the Khalifa, you are going to be watched like a bird watches its prey when he corresponds with his children. He said, you were under observation before, but now you will be even under more intense observation now that I'm the Khalifa. So you have to watch what you're doing, even with a higher degree of vigilance. And when you are in a society that basic norms, it's cool for a 15-year-old kid to tell his friends and get a cheap laugh out of making fun of his old man. It's funny, it's amusing. This is entertainment. And it's completely mainstream. And that's why I brought up the issue of the pole dancer. That, understand, the rapper saying for 2 decades, I want to marry a stripper, made that profession completely normal and completely mainstream.
So, Brother Asad, could I add on to your answer?
Sure, of course.
The 2 things. One was the first part. If your child is attached to you, as they get older, even if they sway a little bit, if they go here and there, which all teenagers tend to do, regardless of what religion they're from, if you've created that attachment to them, with them, and you have that environment at the house where it's an environment of Islam, it's an environment of Quran, these kind of things, and even if they're asking tough questions and they kind of sway away a little bit, if you created that environment of love and that attachment is still there, then eventually what I've noticed, even people that kind of leave in 16, 17, 18 years old, they come back because they realize that, this is where these are people that actually care about me and this is who I'm really attached to. There's a good book that Sister Noor Juda, who we did several programs with, who left Islam for 10 years and then came back, who kind of goes into a deep detail of her journey. It was called Hold On to Your Kids. And in that book, they go into a lot of detail on how to get our children more attached to us and the elders in the community instead of their peers. And you talked about, kind of how people are, sometimes children, when they have issues, nowadays, who do they turn to? They turn to their peers instead of the elders. So this book goes into a good amount of detail on how we can kind of reverse that trend. So yes, just wanted to add that to Mushtaq.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. Ultimately, right, so we have to keep this in mind. It is intrinsic for a child to love their parent. So in one respect, they are doing something that is abnormal to rebel. Let's also keep that in mind. So I think that's an excellent point. And ultimately, yes, that's a very good point, that there are people that, because I was teaching Sunday school at the age of 15, there are people who, you didn't see for 3, 4, 5 years, you get on Eid. But that attachment, specifically, generally the mother, they kind of realized, and they came back into the fold. So we always make dua for them, but that's definitely true, that connection. But when we say, this is one thing I want to emphasize, it's just not the Quran. It's got to be the ethics of the religion. They have to see the ethics of the religion in the household. And the ethics of the religion is standing on principle. It's not making up the rules as you go along. So they see some consistency there. So I think, but that's an excellent point, that love. I mean, even Imran Khan, the current prime minister of Pakistan, he specifically documented this. He said, I didn't take religion seriously, especially when I went to Oxford. He said, the only reason I had was because of the deep influence that the love I had for my mother. You know, and that's a very good piece that he wrote, why the West craves materialism, the East sticks to religion. And he talks about the thing that kept him kind of, at least culturally, attached to the religion was his love for his mother. So that's important. That bond is still sacred. So we shouldn't dismiss it, but we have to work at it. Okay, any other ideas? Because these are good points, and it's good, Talha, that you mentioned that, because I don't want it to be misunderstood, right? That I didn't want it to be misunderstood.
No, it's okay. But I mean, I like this, what do you call, I believe that there should be another session in terms of like Islam in the secular society, because that is a very, very deep, I know parenting has to do a little bit with it, but then, you know, we're in the society that we live in and like all the peer pressure and everything that kids go through, I think that's a whole different issue as well.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, look, okay. What you have, the role of religion in secular society, I'll mention it in 1 minute. It's supposed to be, it's impious piety. It is supposed to be a part-time commitment. And you're supposed to do a couple of rituals. Okay, the dominant religion is Christianity. How do you get to paradise? And those in the outreach committee have seen, we talked about this. Sometimes when they come, they say, well, they'll say us that you're going to go to paradise, and we say, we don't know. So what do you mean you don't know? No, well, we do good works, and we hope through Allah's rahmah and mercy we go to Jannah. And the guy says, you know, in a polite way, you have a pretty bad deal. Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior, and I'm assured paradise. So you do all these things and you pray 5 times a day and you fast and you do all these things and you still have no surety? That's a pretty bad deal. And I've had this conversation multiple times with our non-Muslim guests. For them to understand that you have no surety, even after all of these things, and I'm sure, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. So the role of religion in secular society is again, this is not normal behavior to rebel against your parents. Not just for Muslims, for all of humanity, the history of humanity. So this is a new phenomenon. You know, I remember talking to a guy who was a graduate of Harvard Law School. He was a 40-year-old Black man, and his parents were upset at him that he left his wife for no reason. And then he was going around with different girls. And he said something very profound. I mean, it's just bizarre. He said, well, I don't know what dad is going to do. Shoot me? I'm 40 years old. I can do whatever I want. And it's just very bizarre behavior. It makes no sense, even for that own person. But this behavior is now completely normalized. And that is a big part of this. I think we have to understand that it's not that people have not done improper things, but when certain behavior is completely normal, that's when society is in difficulty. And that's what's very concerning. You know, when you look at these social trends. So again, we're not going to take the exception, but you know, it's you know, I mean, I'll mention this. I know it's being recorded. Like, I look back at my high school friends, because I went to public school, and it didn't happen, but I look back at it now. All of the people who I was close friends with in high school, they all came from dual parent households, mom and dad. Now, I didn't say that, okay, if somebody is from a single parent house, I'm not going to be friends with them. But I look back at it, they came from stable home situations. And these things, they matter. And again, I want to emphasize, it's not like I probed, I said, I'm not going to be friends with that person because they come from a single parent house. That's not what I'm arguing. And there's some children that are in legitimately very difficult situations. But I look at the people who I kind of gravitated towards, the people I was friends with, because I'm closer to my friends from high school than I am to college, because I went to a commuter college. And for those of us who are growing up here, you should, and went to public school, you should reflect about this. But now we have this phenomenon of single parent households that's is endemic now in the Muslim community. And it's only going to accelerate because there's no one that can bring data to say, no, this process is even going to be slowed down, let alone reversed. And that's going to have implications, because it's difficult enough when both parents are 100% committed to give the child the support they need, and to protect them, and to challenge them, and to guide them, and to circle, and to do it as a single parent. That's much, much, much more difficult. So any other questions here? Because we're talking about a lot, and some of it might be slightly off topic, but I think the discussion is healthy because we have to ask ourselves these probing questions. Because our most precious commodity is our time. Our biggest contribution to humanity, for most of us, is going to be, can we produce productive citizens who are obviously God conscious? And that's why when I see the thing, because I do organizational diagnostics and stuff, and I look at, when they say even in business environment, culture always trumps strategy, or culture has strategy for breakfast. They say this in the business environment, that the culture of a company has strategy for breakfast. And this is accepted. There's so much data to support this. Doesn't matter what your strategy is if your work environment is toxic or whatever. So the culture in the house and the culture in our institutions. What is the culture in our house? What is the culture in our institutions?